Grant Denyer now.
It's Grant Denyer.
The gold logie this year. Oh my God, it's Grant Denyer.
And our mum, Chezzi Denyer. She's really crazy.
It's all true.
It's All True, the podcast with Grant and Chezzi Denyer.
Should I feel bad that our intro
doesn't mention George?
Nor that, but here's another layer. It doesn't mention George. I get celebrated in there as a Gold Logie winner, and all it says about you is you're crazy.
Yeah, I know. Have you only just worked it
Yes,
out?
I have.
Can you turn my headphones down a little bit? They're so loud.
Sure thing.
Sorry. The kids,
Can we start a campaign to get Chezzi Denyer a Gold Logie potentially?
Hells yeah.
What am I going to get a Gold Logie for?
Awesomeness being the...
Great Instagram reels.
Yeah, good reels. Podcast queen.
Oh, do you know what? Not going to happen. No.
That's why we've got to do the campaign.
Yeah,
okay,
mate.
all right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe first of all, the first campaign needs to be get Chezzi Denyer on our TV.
Oh, yeah. Maybe you
Yeah.
need a show before you win a TV Logie.
That's-
You're right.
Yeah.
That is the logical way to do things.
Yeah.
Home and away, all the way. Come on. I mean,
Yeah.
you'd be better than half the people on there already. I'm sorry.
You can fill in for what's her name on Home and Away when she's sick.
Who?
The one that looks like you.
Yeah, the one that looks like you. What's
Oh,
her-
Marilyn.
Marilyn,
Oh,
yeah.
my God. Mr. Stewart. I don't think that sounds right, but yes, I could.
She's like our version of the nanny almost, isn't she? Nah.
No.
She's lovely. She's not quite like that.
The nanny was a bit of a, yeah.
But funny.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe I could have like the chaotic cooking show and just film like me cooking every night, screaming at the dog.
And the children
screaming. Yeah.
and the husband. Yeah. Well, we just set up some GoPros, mate, every night. Boom. live stream.
There's my TV show. No one would ever want to run it because there's a lot of swearing,
Well, yeah, you'd be like...
a lot of cursing.
He's just the new Gordon Ramsay.
Oh, true.
Real life.
Mum's kitchen.
Yeah, mum's fucking kitchen. That's what we'll call it.
Have you seen that video of Gordon Ramsay, how he's like got this chicken or something and he walks up with a plate and he says to the person who cooked it, "It's fucking raw." And he's like going off about how raw it is. And it's like turned into this big meme, and it's like a Jurassic World parody video too. Like the dinosaurs are going around going, "Fucking raw."
That's awesome.
Oh, I can picture myself doing that.
Yeah, that's just like our...
And veggies. I have noticed since doing this podcast, I have been swearing a lot more.
Have you? I haven't noticed that.
Since meeting you two, I've been swearing a lot more too.
Have you? I don't even normally swear,
No, yeah, you don't.
do I? But I've sworn at the kids a little bit.
Well, you got to remember, the reason why we created this podcast, right, is so we can say the things that you can't say on commercial television, right?
Yeah, true.
So we should be able to. This is the whole motivation for doing it in the first place. We feel comfortable. If you feel comfortable to say it, say it. We've overshared a shitload in here, but that's the beauty of this space, mate. No one can kick us off air.
Poo face.
No, we don't need to throw to a commercial. Yeah, you should just drop the poo face on your audience.
Poo
Take that.
face,
Whoa.
Is there actually anything when you think back on all the things that we've said that you go, okay, maybe that was just something we shouldn't have said?
Yes.
Yeah, most
Like-
podcasts, anything that the Daily Mail runs. There's usually something stupid that we've said.
They never listen, though, to what we've actually said, and
No.
the truth is so much juicier. I still don't get it, but anyway, because they're lazy. Yes, episode 2, episode 3, Grant talked about that little blue tile and at the cinemas, and I'm not going to go into details, but yes,
tile.
I regret that so much because so many people share their stories.
They stop her in the street sharing their
Diarrhea stories.
explosive poo stories. And in Chezzi's defence, she didn't bring it up. I did.
Yes, you did.
I told that story on behalf of her, and I probably shouldn't have.
No.
To be
And I
honest,
don't
but anyway, we needed to start somewhere, and that's where we started. So, and hopefully we've evolved into something far more sophisticated, intelligent, and maybe
We
take
have.
something out, maybe even a little spiritual at times.
We
So
have.
This is the complete kind of package now, where we're coming at you with maybe we got like a sports hero one day, and then we have like
Sports hero.
a cosmic,
We'll have to find one.
a cosmic.
But today we're talking like real smart stuff.
Yeah.
Like real smart. We've actually got a
Do
doctor.
the Do the zinger that you did before we started the podcast about the, doctor.
We've got a doctor in the waiting room.
Oh, how good's that?
It's like we're running a surgery.
Yeah.
That's the award right there.
We
Dr.
mean Zoom
Stephen
waiting
Wright.
room, obviously. He's just sitting in our Zoom waiting room.
Yeah,
But it's a doctor in a waiting room. Can you believe it?
And he's pretty busy, so we probably should bring him in.
Well, should we say what it's about first?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a big game changer for people who have PTSD or some form of trauma, and there's a lot of people who do.
And
Maybe they have an untreatable depression.
Anxiety.
That's not responding to the normal meds that we've got. Anxiety, yes. So Australia is actually changing the game. Australia is going to become the first country to recognise psychedelics as medicine. So they have realised that this is a big area of potential opportunity because the research is in. It's making massive differences in people's lives. So they're going to recognise psychedelics as medicines. So the Therapeutic Goods Administration has taken researchers by surprise, and they've approved psychedelic substances. So the psychedelic substances that you find in like magic mushrooms, for instance, and MDMA. So they're approving that for use by people with certain mental health conditions, right? So this is a massive game changer. So MDMA and psilocybin. So psilocybin is the ingredient in the mushrooms that makes it a psychedelic. So
it's big news because Australia has always been quite conservative in the medicine sphere. So I think, as Grant said, it's taken a lot of the industry by surprise.
Yeah.
And so we're going to chat today.
And it's from July this year.
Yeah.
So it's a controlled use prescribed by a psychiatrist. So you've got to be undergoing treatment, for you to be able to have access to it.
And we're going to talk to somebody today, Dr. Stephen Bright from all the way over in Perth, and he will be one of these prescribers, I guess. So let's bring him in.
Bring the doctor out of the waiting room and into the sound space that is the
Dania surgery
podcast.
Hi, Dr. Bright. Can you hear us?
Hi. Yes.
There you are. So good to have you on the It's All True podcast. I know that we're taking up some of your very important time, so we won't take too long, but we wanted to have a chat with you about this big news. Australia, the TGA has approved psychedelics as medicines. I've seen some comments from you saying that you were quite surprised. Can you tell us, I guess, you've been doing this for a long time. Why were you so surprised?
Well, my work has been not only looking at the efficacy of MDMA and psychedelics as treatments for mental health, but also more broadly drug policy reform. And Australia hasn't been the first country in the world to do anything significant in the drug policy reform space since 1985, when we introduced harm minimisation, which was groundbreaking at the time and was primarily driven by our Prime Minister, Bob Hawke, whose daughter had experienced problems with heroin. And Bob Hawke realised what we're doing wasn't working and wanted to do something new. And so as somebody that's been watching sort of the drug reform space, this is it's not only surprising, it's fantastic that Australia would take the lead again in something like this.
And this is your area of expertise. Just explain a little bit about yourself and your experience with this form of treatment.
Sure. So I'm a clinically trained psychologist. I've primarily worked most of my career in alcohol and other drug treatment services, so supporting people who are experiencing problems with alcohol and other drugs. I moved to Edith Cowan University about 6 years ago. And during that process, before I moved to ECU, I became involved in an organisation called Psychedelic Research in Science and Medicine. And we established in 2011 with the explicit aim of getting Australia to engage in research into psychedelics and MDMA as psychological treatments. And since moving to ECU, I've been able to coordinate the first Australian trial of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD. And we've been able to administer MDMA so far to only one participant. So, this is very new in Australia. And I guess the other side of it, while it's surprising and there's positives to it, I think the other aspect is I'm not sure if we're ready to roll this out as a mainstream treatment, given that one patient in Australia, just one patient has received this treatment so far.
Wow.
Yeah, that's surprising, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it feels very early to be doing it, but I'm glad they are because, as I'm sure you know, the data is pretty good for this sort of stuff, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. There's very promising data, and that's why I gravitated towards this treatment, 10 plus years ago. I was looking at the first phase 2 clinical trial of MDMA therapy that was being presented in Melbourne by Rick Doblin, who heads the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. They're essentially the non-profit organisation that's been coordinating the worldwide research into MDMA therapy. And it showed that up to 86% of people in that trial no longer met criteria for PTSD 12 months after the treatment. And this was sustained at 3.5 years. And I think what helped, in addition to me seeing patients presenting with substance use issues comorbid with PTSD and not having great outcomes, I think I was also in the right place at the right time with the right mindset, because I really wasn't seeing patients presenting to AOD treatment with their primary drug of concern being MDMA. It was alcohol, cannabis, methamphetamine. So I knew that MDMA wasn't a particularly dangerous drug. And so that combined with the promising data sort of got me interested in it. But it's been really hard to get this research happening in Australia because we're a really conservative country.
Did you say 86% success rate?
That's correct.
Oh, it's astonishing.
That is so high. What is the closest treatment to it? Like what comes in close? Like
and how
counselling
successful is it?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any evidence of treatments for PTSD that are quite that successful. I think some of the things we treat very well in psychology are things like phobia, which have a 90% plus success rate. What's really significant about the MDMA research is these weren't just people with PTSD. These were people with PTSD that had not responded to at least 2 previous treatments.
Wow.
Now, in the following phase 2 studies, and now there's been, a big phase 3 trial published, the success rate's not quite as good, but it's still very, very promising. So about 66 to 68% of people, when you sort of pull the data together, are no longer meeting criteria for PTSD at 12 months.
Wow, that's astonishing.
That is incredible.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to go back here historically. I'm trying to remember some of the documentaries and things that I've seen. I think I saw Rick in a documentary, Rick Dobbin, whatever his name is.
Yes.
He's sort of the pioneer. And I know... So am I right in saying that there are a lot of psychedelic treatments being done, which started with LSD, and then it was really going places. The science of it was through the roof. The results were astonishingly wonderful. It was very, very promising avenue of treatment that was emerging. But then the Reagan government kind of shut it all down, and when he went hardcore on the no drugs sort of policy, and that just sort of stopped all this research and medical development in its tracks. And there's been sort of zero since until sort of recently. Am I historically correct?
You're very close. It was the Nixon administration that really started this off back in the late 60s. And it wasn't because the drugs were particularly dangerous. As you were saying, there was good evidence starting to emerge in the late 60s. There were over 1,000 scientific papers published on 10,000 participants that received that treatment, particularly effective for things like alcohol use disorder. But it wasn't so much the concern about the drugs in the clinic. It was that they sort of escaped the laboratory and hippies were using LSD. And there was this concern that, people that were taking LSD didn't really want to go to Vietnam and kill other humans. And so the government felt they needed to do something about it. And they started a really effective propaganda campaign overstating the harmful effects of LSD. And I think, the evidence evidence of that propaganda campaign is still with us today, in that none of the research, or almost none of the research that's happening today, is using LSD. And that's partly because LSD has a longer effect. It lasts sort of 12 hours versus, say, psilocybin or MDMA, which are closer to 6 to 8 hours. But it's not just that, it's that LSD has such a strong stigma attached to it. People are concerned that if you submit a protocol using LSD to an ethics committee, that it might be rejected because of that stigma.
Right, because that was basically to shut down all the anti-Vietnam protesting. It was just a blanket no on all those drugs. So they could effectively, anyone who was using it, they were arrestable. And
absolutely.
And so it took the power out of the anti-government, anti-war protesting movement. So it was it was a masterstroke strategy by the government, in propaganda for them, but
at that time,
at the cost of what was an emerging form of medical treatment that was having profound effects. So it was devastating.
It was devastating. And there was also a racial component to it as well. Nixon was looking at groups that he could scapegoat. And so there were hippies and also Black Americans. And so it was, and there is, evidence of his former advisors that have come out and said explicitly that's what this was about. It was devastating. And I think we can learn from this. And hopefully, as we reach this new wave of treatments that are going beyond the research now into medical mainstream use, we want to avoid some of the things that occurred in the past so that we don't have that sort of hysteria. We don't want patients to have significant adverse effects from these treatments that's going to end up in the front page of the newspaper, because not only could that set back the research and what we're doing here in Australia, other countries will be watching Australia and watching the implementation of this. And so if we screw it up, we're probably going to set the rest of the world back a few years by not doing it well.
That's a big responsibility, isn't it?
George?
Sorry.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, Dr. Bright, sort of going through primary school and high school, doing PDHPE and health and Healthy Harold coming to school, the big message, don't do drugs, don't touch them, don't go anywhere near them. Is there going to be a bit of a restructure in the education system moving forward and saying, well, these are the right ones, these are the wrong ones? Where do we go from here?
Well, fortunately, I tend to avoid school-based drug education because I'm limited in what I can say to people that are under 18, but I do a lot of education with 18, 19-year-olds, and there's good evidence that if we do drug education, for it to be effective, firstly, we have to figure out what do we mean by effective. Do we mean less people using drugs or less people experiencing harm from drugs? Because there's very little evidence that we can do education that stop people from using drugs, but we can give them information that means they're less likely to experience harm, or their friends are less likely to experience harm because they're able to help their friends out. So I think in moving forward, we need to sort of take that approach into schools where we treat young adults like adults and provide them with all of the information. So, if you go to mdma.gov.au, even now with the changes that have just been passed by the TGA, it's going to list all these terrible things that you'll experience if you take MDMA. Now, of course, anyone that's taken MDMA knows that, well, they're quite unlikely, but there's all these positive things as well. If there weren't the positive things, people wouldn't use these drugs recreationally. So I think a balanced approach to education is providing the positive information, the negative information, I guess things that are neutral effects as well, and allowing people to make informed decisions about their drug use rather than telling people just say no, because we know that doesn't work.
I think I might have put this in my email to you that I've spoken on this podcast about my experience with PTSD, and I was treated in a treatment facility that had a lot of ex-veterans and people from the Navy. There was a lot of first responders, and I was quite fortunate that the treatment program, that they set out for us did start to help me. But there was a lot of people that I was there with who it didn't work for them. And as you said, they had, comorbid addictions. So a lot of them, used marijuana, or they became alcoholics and they couldn't stop that. I guess, I feel like we've lost a lot of people to something like PTSD, and I feel, I guess, I feel really happy and really fortunate that Australia is starting to, to look at this kind of stuff, because I've seen a lot of people speaking in different documentaries from America, talking firsthand about their experiences and how this has changed their lives. And, I guess you've seen it firsthand. What can you tell us about what you've seen and what you've witnessed?
Well, I think the first point is, as you say, like for yourself, the existing treatments do work for a lot of people. And when they do work, they work very well. But as you also say, there are this group that don't respond to our existing treatments. And it's essential that we develop alternative treatments to assist those people that don't respond to our existing treatments. The only concern I have about the rollout of this is that it might be giving people a little bit too much hope in these new treatments. So within our clinical trial, we've experienced a lot of difficulty recruiting people. We're not short of people sticking their hand up that want to take MDMA. What we're struggling to find is people that are not taking any antidepressant medication. We're struggling to get people off their antidepressant. They can't. It could cause a medical emergency if they're taking an antidepressant and they take MDMA. So we try to titrate people down off their antidepressant, but we're finding that very difficult. And so I think as this is rolled out as a mainstream treatment, and as there's a lot of hope among communities of people affected by PTSD, I think we need to communicate a bit of a reality check that this treatment, there is good data, it's promising, but it's not going to be for everybody. And certainly our experience has been that there's lots of factors that could make a person ineligible for the treatment, because I just worry, with a lot of communication I've had with clinicians around Australia over the past week or so, they're concerned that some of their patients see this as the holy grail. And if this doesn't work, then life is over for them. And I don't think that's a really helpful mindset to have.
Okay.
Well, as you said before, sorry to interrupt, as you said before, there's a lot of people who have tried several different things and it hasn't worked for them. And then this does work. But there's also people who, like myself, counselling worked really well for me. I guess in your trials and in the things that you've done and you've seen, what can you share with us about what you have seen and what you've experienced? Okay,
there's two ingredients. You've got MDMA and you've got psilocybin. So why are they so good?
Okay. Well, they're good, or they're useful. I think I just slightly changed the wording there. They're useful drugs in the context of psychotherapy. I think that's the other ingredient, is counselling, psychotherapy.
Yeah.
If people with PTSD take MDMA all the time at festivals and they're not cured of their PTSD because it's happening outside of the therapy room. And so it's important to understand that there's a container that we're working within. So MDMA is quite useful because it's a bit like alcohol. It just takes the edge off and people are able to talk about things that they might not have ever been able to talk about. Unlike alcohol, which kind of scrambles your brain, after a person who's intoxicated has talked about their trauma for the first time, they're not able to remember it the next day. That's the nature of alcohol. With MDMA, it actually turns on parts of the brain that are associated with language and processing. So not only does it allow the person to talk about it, it helps them reprocess the trauma as well. But it's a very invasive, intensive psychotherapy process. There's 18 weeks of therapy. 3 of those involve MDMA dosing days that go for up to 8 hours and involve an overnight stay in hospital for safety reasons, and also to help the person continue to process what came up in the session while they're not exposed to TV and social media and other things. So we like to have them in a space where they're able to do some drawing or some writing and journaling or something like that to just continue processing that. With psilocybin, we're not really sure exactly how it works and why it's effective, but it seems to be particularly effective in conditions that involve trouble with psychological flexibility, not being able to have that psychological flexibility. So with depression, for example, people develop these really rigid beliefs about themselves, about not being adequate, about others in the world, being not a great place to live in. And so it seems like psilocybin might disrupt those pathways for a period of time, which allow people to see themselves and their situation in a completely different light. And so it's hypothesized that that might be the mechanism of action for psilocybin. But they've actually, even though this TGA decision sort of lumped them together, the two very different drugs, and the way we do the therapy is quite different as well.
Wow. The one thing I know about PTSD, right, is that can lead to things like addiction, and then we can go on to antidepressants and stuff. But those kind of medicines, are they're sort of treating the symptoms of the original act, right? But do these have the power to kind of rewire your circuitry so the initial act is nowhere near more as traumatic?
Yeah, I think with MDMA and just continuing with this distinction, psilocybin has never been used for the treatment of trauma so far. Right. And in fact, people with trauma are excluded from those trials because it's thought that somebody with trauma, if they're given psilocybin, it actually might re-traumatize them. Right. Because they work quite differently, these drugs in the brain. With MDMA and trauma, I think what it's doing is, using that analogy of rewiring the brain, it's allowing the memory of the trauma, which is initially stored in a hot part of the brain, is easily accessed by various triggers. And, people can experience flashbacks when it's triggered. It's helping the person to reprocess and place that trauma into the parts of the brain associated with their normal everyday memories.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So you're treating the cause, not the symptoms, which most of our medicine, that you'll get, from a doctor or a professional, is often just treating the symptoms. This might have the power, and it looks like it's sort of the data is showing of fixing the initial cause.
And I think that's the importance of, remembering that it's within the container of psychotherapy, because as we've already talked about, psychotherapy itself can be a cure as well. And essentially that's what the psychotherapy is doing. It's helping through talk therapy. It's helping the person reprocess those trauma memories so that they're reprocessed and filed away in the normal parts of the brain where they probably should be stored, but they haven't been because of the nature of the trauma.
Oh, so it's just giving you deeper access, basically, and you're helping unlock all those areas that were shut off, like a big safe. You're cracking the safe.
And it's one of the most interesting things about MDMA therapy, and to a degree psilocybin therapy as well, is it's very non-directive. So with talk therapies, you have an hour appointment with somebody and it's quite directive, quite interactive. With the MDMA sessions, the person can be silent with their eyes closed, with music playing, internally sort of looking within themselves for up to 2 hours at a time, where we might check in on them after that point. But rather than us sort of telling them to revisit the trauma before they even take the MDMA, they make an agreement that that's going to be their intention. Their intention is to go inward and explore the trauma. And the MDMA seems to do a really good job of helping the person direct their attention to where it needs to go. There's a lot of trust that's put in both the medicine and trust that's put in the person that they know what's best. There's this idea that we have this inner healing intelligence within us, and people need to just tap into that inner healing intelligence. One of the people that trained to be in this therapy is an ex-emergency department physician, and he used the analogy of, if somebody comes into the emergency room and they've got a big cut, he doesn't heal them of the cut. He just creates an environment where the body heals itself. And so what we're trying to do in MDMA therapy is provide the conditions for the person to heal themselves.
Wow. See, George is on this podcast. He's 21 years of age. So we've unfortunately traumatized him many times over with the embarrassing and horrible things that we've said on this podcast about ourselves. So if George takes like MDMA therapy, though, is he going to have an issue where he's just going to be addicted to like glow sticks and rave music for the rest of his life? Is this a risk?
Not that I'm aware of, not in clinical research. I think one of the really interesting things, from my perspective as a drug researcher, one of the really interesting things that we found from this research is, people, when they're given MDMA in a clinical setting, don't get the come down that people using MDMA recreationally often report. And we're not really sure why. It might be because we're doing it in a clinical environment. People aren't dancing and they're getting enough water and things like that. It might be that we're trying to recruit people that really haven't used much MDMA recreationally. And, if you use the drug more and more, it might have more negative effects on people. But I think, the really interesting thing from the research is that it doesn't seem to produce some of the effects, like wanting to get some glow sticks that we'd see in recreational use. And very few people that have participated in clinical trials have sought to access illicit MDMA afterwards. I know of one participant that reportedly did, and he tried to replicate sort of the experience that he'd had in the MDMA therapy, and it wasn't the same, and he said he wouldn't do it again.
Yeah, okay.
You have to really have a practitioner that you can trust, and it has to be the right scenario. Does that worry you that...
That's my biggest worry here is there's only about 12 of us in Australia that are trained to do MDMA therapy, and maybe 30, I'm guessing, about 30 people trained to do psilocybin therapy. So there's really not many people trained in Australia to do this. And I don't just worry about, the patient being able to trust the clinician, but that the clinician has the required expertise and training to be able to provide the treatment safely for the patient, because things could potentially come up, and the actions of the therapist in the context of a drug-assisted session could actually do more harm than good. So I think what we need to do in the next few months in Australia is figure out how do we define an MDMA therapist or a psilocybin therapist, and what sort of regulation is going to be placed around that? Because at the moment, the detail from the TGA is quite thin. It doesn't really mention psychotherapy, and it certainly doesn't mention how they will accredit psychiatrists who will become authorised prescribers.
Psilocybin's a funky thing, isn't it? It comes from mushrooms. Mushrooms are an incredible living thing. The fact that they are they're super connected to each other and all other living things that sort of grow in the ground. They have this amazing communication network between all the other living things that are growing in the ground.
We watched a Netflix special.
Can you tell?
Yeah.
Fantastic Fungi.
Yes.
Yeah, Fantastic Fungi on Netflix, yeah.
The pictures are amazing when you see, it's stunning.
Incredible. I'd highly recommend people watch that. Incredible cinematography.
Because I don't like eating mushrooms, and I don't like mushroom soup and or mushroom sauce, but I was blown away. And if you were doing it for social reasons, say not medical, so it sort of gives you a deeper connection. People have visions, so they from what the documentary is, and you see patterns, you can see creatures, so you can see past relatives. Like the scope is wide open as to what kind of experience you can have. Is that right?
Absolutely. I think when I first started this journey, or at least when we did the training in 2018, I thought I'd made the smart decision to be working with MDMA rather than psilocybin, because I'd seen, I'd done a lot of trip sitting at festivals, looking after people that were having challenging experience at a festival with 20,000 people.
Oh my God.
Didn't look after anybody with MDMA that had just taken MDMA. It was usually other drugs. So I thought MDMA, people have a great time. But what I saw was in the therapy, actually, it was almost psychedelic in the way it worked. People would believe that the male therapist was the person's father who sexually abused them. I was quite surprised at that. Whereas, with psilocybin, like you're saying, it does tend to be a lot less predictable. You can have every intention in the world, in terms of what you want to work on, but the mushrooms will sort of show you what you need to see at the time. I think this raises a really good, an important topic, which is that desperate people will do desperate things. I think it's going to be very difficult to access these treatments, even with these TGA changes. Like I've said, limited therapists, the cost is going to be incredible. The MDMA therapy that we're doing in our clinical trial costs about $20,000 per patient.
God.
So who's going to be able to afford that sort of a treatment? And so in turn, I think people are going to access, underground treatments, underground therapies, ayahuasca circles. All of this stuff is already happening in Australia. And I think it's pointless to shut my eyes and pretend it's not happening. This is happening. So what we can do is as you say, Grant, we can give people some education and information on if they are going to go out and do that, what can they do to minimize the likelihood they experience any harm and maximize the likely therapeutic component. So things like making sure you're doing it with somebody who you really trust, making sure you usually want to do it in a place that's with very low stimulation, like a dark room. Nobody's going to come knocking on the door, that you're going to have that privacy for 6 to 8 hours with somebody that's just in the background, just making sure you're okay. Or, if you need some water or something, they can help get you that, because it really affects your ability to walk and do anything. Most people will just lie back with some eye shades on, listen to some music for 6 hours, or even just sit in silence for 6 hours as that experience unfolds. And a lot of my colleagues now, because we're seeing so many people accessing this outside of clinical trials, a lot of my colleagues have set up practice around helping people integrate those experiences and try to maximize the therapeutic utility of it where they're doing it outside of clinical research.
So don't buy it from a guy in a McDonald's car park out the back of a van. Is that what you're saying?
Unless you really trust him.
Yeah, no. You trust him. I think one of the really interesting things with mushrooms, like you say, they're natural. They're not actually that hard to grow. People can grow their own psilocybin mushrooms. And I feel like what needs to happen in Australia in the immediate future, now this announcement has been made, is that we decriminalise at least MDMA and psilocybin. But I'd like to see all drugs decriminalised. We know that criminal offences for the person that's just using the drug is unhelpful. We know it does more harm than good. But I think by decriminalising psilocybin mushrooms, because of this issue with access and, it costing so much money, well, it really doesn't cost much money to grow one's own mushrooms and to use them that way. And I think by decriminalising it would help bring some of the underground to the above ground, because speaking to people that work in this underground environment, when there's a facilitator that's, sexually abusing clients or just doing untoward things, there's really little anybody can do about it, because they're already doing something illegal. There's no regulation body for it. And so if it were decriminalised, then I think it would bring it into the above ground a little bit more. Yep. And ultimately, if a patient or a consumer at one of these circles is experiencing, some medical problems, I think the facilitator is more likely to contact an ambulance if they know there's no criminal charges that will apply for them ringing an ambulance. And ultimately, we would want them to do that as soon as possible. Whereas now, I think people would hold off until they thought, that we absolutely need an ambulance, because nobody wants to go to jail for running these circles.
Make a very good point.
And we have some turf outside, and we've started growing little mushrooms, and this is just taking a sideward step here, but my puppy was eating the mushrooms, and I was really freaked out thinking these could be poisonous. So I looked up what the mushrooms are, and there's thousands of mushrooms, and I'm going, okay, kids, does this look like this mushroom or this or whatever? God. And we're all trying to look, and I pulled a whole heap out, and from what I could find, there was all these news reports of people who've been rushed to hospital because they've eaten mushrooms that they've found in the woods that they thought were magic mushrooms, but they're highly poisonous. And there's a lot of reports about this. I was so surprised.
Yeah. It's a genuine danger as well at the moment, is people going out foraging their own. And not just magic mushrooms, edible mushrooms as well. I spent quite a bit of time living in Melbourne, where there's lots of mushrooms, grow all around Melbourne, and went on a couple of tours, foraging tours, to learn about how to find different gourmet mushrooms. And what was really interesting was that the ones that looked like they were edible were the ones that would kill you, and the ones that were blue and you'd never think to pick them, they were actually the gourmet ones.
Oh, wow. So it's don't take life into your own hands and just and go cavalier out in the forest.
No, because they're toxic.
We've also been watching another TV show called The Last of Us at the moment, and that's a show about mushrooms, basically fungus taking over humankind and turning us all into zombies, which is like an apocalyptic end of the world movie. Is that going to happen in real life, Doctor?
No, I haven't watched it, but I have been following the commentary, and I believe there's 3 steps that need to take place for that to become reality, and each of those 3 steps are not only improbable, they're impossible.
Hang on a second. You just said there's 3 steps. That sounds very possible to me. 3 doesn't sound like many. You mean we're 3 steps away from being turned into fungus-headed zombies?
Exactly.
What are the 3 steps?
I actually can't remember off the top of my head, but it would require, the mushroom that they've based the story on is a real mushroom that it's the spores get into an insect, and the mushroom then takes over the insect's brain and starts controlling the insect and forces it just before the mushroom opens up and releases all its spores to a high point, so it spreads it as far as possible, and then the ant dies.
That happens in real life?
It happens in real life, yeah.
So they take over an animal and they control that animal. Wow.
That's what's happened to the puppy. That's why the puppy keeps
pissing everywhere.
Mushrooms are incredible. You're talking about the way that they build these mycelium networks that can be huge. They can be up to 20, 30 kilometers in radius, just one mushroom, because I guess what we tend to think of when we see the mushroom is the fruiting body, which has spores in it to help spread the mushroom. But that's just like seeing an apple on a tree. The thing with mushrooms is they're under the ground, so you can't actually see the tree that's growing the apples. You only see the apples when they pop up at the right time. But yeah, they are a fascinating... They're a fascinating species because they also don't fit into... They're not a plant and they're not an animal. We're not quite sure where they fit.
Wow. And they communicate, don't they, amongst one another? And yeah, they
communicate not only amongst one another, but also with the various trees that they're growing with. So they'll share nutrients with trees, or help the tree fend off a parasitic fungus or something like that. So they will communicate with they have this symbiotic relationship with the other plants that grow nearby.
Wow. That's actually quite nice, because when I was growing up, people used to say, like, being treated like a mushroom, like kept in the dark and fed shit. Yeah. They're quite nice and caring, aren't they? I've just realised that I said 10 minutes of your time and we've kept you for 42 minutes. And Grant's just warming up, so we should let you go, because I know this has been probably the busiest week for you, given this announcement. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Really enjoyed the chat. We'll let you get back to saving lives or whatever it is that you do. Keep up the good work, my good friend, and let's hope the cost of all this comes down in the future as the studies roll out and the news is good and the intel's coming in, and then the government supports it so more people can get access to it, because there's no shortage of trauma out there, my friend, is there?
No.
Absolutely. It's a brave new world that we're moving into, and it's exciting, but it's also, I guess I'm cautiously optimistic.
Unreal. Well, good to hear. That was a fascinating chat. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks.
Wow, that's a big game changer, which is good, because I don't have a lot of faith in, a lot of the process of medicine that we have out there, and it's all big farmers kind of just dominating our medical landscape, and I don't know if that's great either.
I think you have to have a look at what we've been doing hasn't been working.
No.
So, we need to, I guess, to be a bit more open-minded. So, yeah, it's big news. Big news.
And trauma is not always either extreme events, you got to remember. It can be something as simple as something that happened to you when you were younger. You might have had a car accident. You might have been, seen active service on the front line. It can be a myriad of things.
Yep.
And unfortunately, life is traumatic, and we something happens to all of us at some point. So it'd be nice to know that there's these natural. I don't know if MDMA is natural, but psilocybin certainly is.
I don't know what MDMA is. Yeah. How did you find that chat, George?
Very interesting. I think the thing that got me was that one person was being treated, and the fact that it's going to roll out potentially very, very soon
In July this year.
Yeah, like that's huge. But I definitely wouldn't be one of the first people to give that a go if I was struggling or needing help in that space. I think I'd like to see more studies and figure out what the side effects are of it as well. You know,
They're
I
very
guess a
short
lot
lived,
of-
which is the good thing. But
A
I
lot
think
of-
you'd be right, mate. We'll get you a bloody mirror ball and smoke machine, some flashing lights in there. You'll bloody love it.
No,
I think so.
you have to do
Yeah.
it in a clinical sense, as he said. It's like people who are desperate. They're desperate. Like we're talking about, and one man comes to mind who spoke in a Netflix special that I saw, I think, and he was saying that he had tried everything, and he'd also tried to take his life several times, and he was very fortunate that he wasn't successful, and this was a last-ditch effort for him to try and change the trajectory of his life. And
it was successful.
And it was successful. And you're talking about people who are really lost, and they're desperate. They're desperate to, to feel better, because nobody wants to feel that bad.
No.
It's
And you got to remember, although there's only one person in Australia who's officially received treatment, as he said, there is a bit of an underground thing that happens here, and he's obviously kept in contact with some of those people who do that. And
well, I guess
and
you'd
plus
have
there's been
to if
studies in
you're-
America that ongoing for many, many decades. So there is other data to draw on, although it hasn't sort of really happened in this country before. But I'm glad we're sort of leading the charge. Yeah.
I'm surprised. I didn't think
Same.
Australia was that. I thought
It
Progressive.
doesn't feel real, this news, does it?
no. I remember I ordered something once from Hong Kong. I don't know, and then they threw in such a side note. It was like a handbag or something from Hong Kong, and they threw in some vitamins that were supposed to be like really good for helping with energy. Do you remember this?
Yeah,
And then
oh
I
my
got
God.
I got a note, because like this website sold all this different stuff. I got a note from customs saying that like part of my package had been, what did they say? It had been, it had illegal ingredients in it. And I don't even know like exactly what the ingredients were. But I remember when I looked it up, I was like, oh, that's a herb that's legal in all other countries except for Australia. And I was talking to somebody from customs, and they said, yeah, Australia is really strict on that kind of stuff. Like the TGA are one of the strictest in the world. So I was quite surprised to hear this.
I remember you when you took those tablets.
No, I didn't get the tablets.
Oh,
They
didn't
went
they?
to,
Oh,
no.
those ones. Oh, I
Oh,
thought
no, they did release them.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you were insane. You were so manic. It gave you so much energy that you were like, I think I'm going to clean the house. I'm going to clean the house. Do you want to go down to the shops? Do you want to go to the shops? We'll go buy some stuff. You hungry? Oh, yeah, let's go eat. I was like, what the hell's happened to you?
No, they had a lot Like like they had
Yeah,
like green tea extract and
They were
something else. It was
full on.
like, yeah. But yeah.
I said, I'll
It
take
was.
those. Thank you. And I threw them in the bin because it also made you exceptionally anxious.
Yeah,
Maybe
and
we should try and
I
get
don't really
somebody
know.
onto the podcast at some point who actually does psychedelics.
Well, it's hard because it's illegal, so I don't know if anyone would put their head up.
Well, I reached
I guess
out.
if we kept them anonymous.
Yeah.
I reached out to some people who have like been part of case studies and overseas, and I haven't
That'd
heard
be
back.
cool.
But
Someone who's undergone the treatment who can sort of talk firsthand of the benefits.
yeah. And also I've spoken to, but he couldn't come on today, but an emergency room doctor who actually fronted the veterans. I can't remember the word of it, but it was like a big council where he was basically saying we need to change the setup that we have at the moment, and I
He an
think
expert
he's
in veteran PTSD, was he?
yes, and he's
trauma.
seen firsthand the change that this has made overseas, and so it's a big topic, and I like exploring it. It's a bit different. On another note, today I did a mediumship circle, George. I did.
A mediumship circle? What's that?
So there's a medium school.
So you mean like a medium,
like a psychic school.
medium?
Yeah, in Canada. And so I did a circle with 19 people. They call it a circle, I think. I'm not sure. It was via Zoom. And so you have a bit of a lesson in, connecting to your intuition, and then you go off into breakout rooms. So you just get paired up with someone, and it was really interesting. So we did a bit of a meditation first, and then we went into the breakout rooms. And these are people, like, there was nobody from Australia, which I was pleasantly, I was happy with.
Why? Because you thought...
Because I was thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm going to have to, I don't know, read messages for this person. It's like a practice run. And so I went into this room, a breakout room with this woman, this face, this American lady, or she might have been Canadian. And then a third girl got put into our room, and they said, we'll give you extra time. So, the first girl that I was in the room with, she said, well, I'll read for the other girl. So she was feeling like, she wanted to give that a go. And yeah, she just closed her eyes and then said a few things, and then it was my turn, and I was thinking, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to give it a go. All right. So, you set your intentions. It's a lot about setting intentions today.
Yeah, he said the same thing, didn't he?
So you set your intentions and you just say, please give me the only healing messages and of the highest possible source. And so I closed my eyes and I was like, I feel like Rory, the teacher, just said to just say whatever comes to mind. So I felt like tingling in my hands. So I was like, I feel tingling in my hands. And then just kind of like pictured this person like putting their hands on, someone and healing. I said, oh, are you a kinesiologist or, and you think that you just like, you have no idea. And then the next thing that I said was, there's music and dancing and like, kind of
Hang on, what did she say to, are you a kinesiologist?
She said, yeah, I'm a healer. Yeah.
So you nailed it.
And I was
never met this person, know nothing about them, and you picked a career.
Yeah, I kind of glossed over that bit, didn't I? Yeah. I was like, okay, and then I was, and you don't have very long, but I just wanted to keep going. I don't know, I thought it was fun.
Where did you hit it with next?
So then I said dancing and music and chanting, and I just see arms moving, like this, and her face was kind of like, and she said, that's what I do to like get into the zone, to do this kind of healing work. And
that's
I was like,
routine.
Oh. And then I was like, I can see Indians, like ancient Indians, and tents and dancing and chanting, and she didn't really say anything to that, so I just kept going. And then I was like, and there's something about a dog, and she's like, whoa. I was like, and a god. And so in my head I just pictured this like husky like Alsatian, I don't know, it just came into my head. And then I pictured
God and a dog and God.
Yeah.
Our God.
And a dog and God. And she's like, oh my God. She goes, my dog Zeus is my life.
Zeus.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I was like,
that's the god of war, I think. Zeus, god of war.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I think
but
so.
I got goosebumps. I've got it
amazing.
now as well. And she's like, oh my God, that's incredible. And I was like, yeah, that was really fun.
Wow. So you were
So you've got it. You've
three from
actually got the
three.
touch.
You're psychic, medium, whatever.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
See,
So-
every girl thinks they're psychic, right? But
Yeah.
I've actually seen you pull out some stuff, whether it's over a couple of wines or whatever, and you
couple of wines.
friggin'
I'd say
nail
my
someone.
radar's a bit off then. Yeah, but I really enjoyed it. But I kind of, I don't know. I actually thought I was going to get it all incorrect. But when she said that, it was really validating. I was like, hell yeah, a dog and a god. And I was like, yeah,
That's pretty cool.
it was.
So this
Like,
is
Do you think
spot
we
on.
could do an episode where you sort of read GD and myself?
yes.
I don't know.
So this is only new for you, yeah?
I only did it like 2 hours ago. It was like, I want to do the course first, but I was thinking maybe we could get the teacher on the podcast. I have to ask her.
Because she reckons everyone can do it.
Yeah, she said everyone can do it.
We can all do it.
And so I thought maybe we could ask her
Fantastic.
to give us a couple of tips on how to get in touch with your intuition. And because what I loved was that she said that we all have different senses that we excel at. So she did a bit of a visualization, and you had to then, like, she, you know, told you about a beach scene and you had your eyes closed. Now, could you see it in your mind? Could you feel the wind or the, you know, the heat from the sun? Could you hear the waves crashing, or did you just kind of knew what was going to come next? And I thought that was so interesting. I don't know where my notes are, but it was like clairvoyancy is seeing it, which is what I could visualize it very well. Clairaudience, audial or whatever it is hearing of it. Well, that's not my strongest.
So you hear the answers, or you hear whatever the future is.
Yeah, like you hear, you know, the waves or the birds, or that's not my strongest sense. But the feeling, you know, I could feel the water on my feet, and like if you pictured yourself now at a beach, you know, can you feel it, or can you?
Well,
hear
it's a
it?
nude beach, so I can see 2 footprints to the sand and a big long line in between those footprints.
Oh my God. I'm
Sorry.
not doing a reading for you. You two kids. It's serious stuff, you know. I was just trying to
I've
help
got an
you out.
idea. So we recorded the kids at the beginning of the podcast in the intro saying she's really crazy. It can now be she's really psychic.
Yes,
But I'm not, because I haven't actually done. I just
I
predict.
think you are. You just gave us your 3 from
You've just
3 on
proven
this
it.
woman you've never met. That's
Yeah, that is
psychic,
true.
mate.
Yeah, that is
You're
true.
really psychic.
It was over a Zoom. You weren't even in her presence. You weren't holding a piece of her jewellery or feeling her aura or whatever you need to do, mate. You can do it through a computer.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Our life's
Career
going to
change.
change. Yeah.
it's going to change.
How can I manipulate
no.
this for our benefit?
No, do you know
Lotto
what?
numbers.
I have a
if
lot-
you see us win Lotto 67 times, you'll know that she's developed her skill and she's pretty good.
I don't know what the use of it is, though. And this is what I want to find out, because I know that I have something there, because I've done random things before where I say, oh, that tree's going to fall down.
You've
or,
predicted
like,
the future. I've seen it. Yeah, a couple of times. It's uncanny. Sometimes it's not unimportant things.
It's always unimportant
Yeah,
things.
it's never anything. It's always something silly and that
It's just so random.
doesn't change anything, but you can do it. I've seen you do it.
Yeah. And so what I guess I wanted to get out of it was like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Well, I think you sharpen your skill, and then it probably reveals itself, you know? Maybe it's to help people heal, kind of like the doctor was. You know, you're helping them find the answers that they can't seem to find themselves. That'd be a pretty rewarding bloody existence.
Yeah, that would.
Like, I feel that we are all antennas, right? And the universe is sending out information constantly. Now, if your antenna is strong and it's clear and you are tuned to it, I think lots of answers come to you, that are supposed to find their way to you. But I think that we can dull down our antenna a bit, whether it's alcohol or eating badly or too much social media or just so much noise, right?
That all of those things, what you just said, like too much social media dumbs down your vibrations, according to my lesson.
Yep.
Too much alcohol, excessive foods, excessive stimulation.
You know what? I also have a theory that the government wants you to be a slightly less in tune person, because a population that is dulled down is easier to control, easier to just manipulate. So I don't think they want us being higher beings. I think that's why our food isn't healthy enough. I think it's why our lifestyles aren't healthy enough.
That's giving our governments a lot of credit for being really smart.
Yeah, maybe not this government, but
I don't think any governments that I've
but
ever
I think
heard
how
of.
do you make a population compliant? Well, then you dull them down. You dole their instruments down.
Whoa, I think we need to get Albanese on here to
That's
attack
pretty deep.
your...
That's pretty
Yeah,
deep.
it
I'm
is
not a
pretty
conspiracy
deep.
theorist, guys. Back
Really?
off.
I think
Well,
you...
can we do a conspiracy theorist episode at some point?
I bloody love conspiracy theories.
Oh
to be
my
honest.
God, I know who we can get on. Grant's best friend.
Oh, Jesus.
Old best friend Reese, who
Oh, mate, he's got all the answers.
he's got all the...
He knows every
He
conspiracy
sends it-
theory
yeah.
that exists.
Um,
It is, because sometimes it's like old fables, like old stories. Sometimes there's old stories because there's elements of truth in them. So sometimes they're right. Sometimes, not always.
what about superstitions?
Oh, like black cats and under ladders
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that one. I've never had a strong feeling about superstitions. I try not to be superstitious in my life. Like some dudes I race with, like professional racers, sometimes they'll only... I think Will Davison puts on his left shoe before his right shoe every time or something.
That's OCD. That's
It could
not-
be.
That's
Some
not-
people only wear, have red undies or whatever when they race. Some people have like a pre-race ritual that they do. But I try not to do that because I feel like I'm giving power away by believing in something external of me to try and make me go better. And I thought that's a slippery slope.
So you don't believe in superstitions, but you believe in conspiracy theories.
Not all conspiracy theories. No, I don't have a dungeon under here full of guns and stuff. Like, I'm not one of those guys. A prepper. I'm not a prepper.
What about if we get...
Although
on-
I was in a TV show called Preppers.
Oh, you What about if we get on somebody who can...
It was a minor role.
Who's like a meditation expert? Because that is supposed to be like the number one way to help raise your vibration
And
to
open
be
up
the...
all those, to receive all those messages
Yeah.
from the universe.
Like, because meditation is actually, it's quite difficult. I don't know, is that a podcast thing or is that a visual?
I don't know, people...
It'd be like
if people
for
are like
half an hour.
me, meditation's hard. Someone telling you how to do it is hard and boring. I know the benefits of it, but it is a very difficult thing to do. I don't know if it's a good listen, someone telling you how to meditate.
Do you know what? But the teacher today, she did like a 5-minute like visualization one, and it was like...
Oh, it's a
really
game
good.
changer. It
Like-
reduces your anxiety.
But, like, we could get
It
on-
can beat depression.
Yeah.
It makes you in tune with... You're better in the flow with life. Opportunities come to you because your instrument is sharp. Things start falling your way.
We
you
need
get good
to-
luck. Opportunities come your way.
So we've basically just said how much we need meditation in our
Look,
lives.
I know we need it, okay, but it's freaking hard to do.
But that's what I'm saying.
On a similar vein, could we have an episode where one of us or all three of us get hypnotized?
Yeah. See, yeah.
That would be gold.
I want someone to explain to me why it works and how it works. Because I've seen it work. And it's...
But you mean for entertainment value or for...
I wonder if...
Like legitimately, what's the ins and outs? Let's get Daryl Summers on. He hosted that wonderful show. You're back in the room.
That's right, I did too. I'm all for that. I want to hear from a hypnotist to reveal all their secrets.
Yeah, but,
And I want him to teach me how to do it to someone else so I can kind of manipulate my own outcomes.
But I was
healthy.
hypnotized to help release tears, like to allow me to cry. Do you remember that? I had to go through all the different emotions.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, it was only a few years ago. Remember? And yeah,
And can you cry now? Well, yeah, you can, obviously.
I cry all the time.
Actually let it out.
I cry all the time now. Yeah. But it was a problem where I was very stoic and I had this internal feeling of myself that I cried too much, and somewhere along the line I kind of somehow stopped it. And so
Which is not healthy. No.
and so what it was doing was trapping emotions in me. And so I did, how do you not remember that? I did like a 12-week course with a hypnotherapist. And I remember saying to her, are you going to make me quack like a duck or do all this? And she was like, no, that's different type of hypnotherapy.
But can you?
Quack. Oh, stop. Yeah, that's different type of hypnotherapy. That's like deep hypnotherapy. So there's different levels and yeah. So you want to talk to like one of those people who get up on stage and hypnotize people.
Hell yeah. Yeah. I want them, yeah. I want to, I'd like to know if we can do it. or how to do it. Imagine you're like going in. Imagine you wanted to hit your boss up for a pay rise, and you could just go in that office and you go with your eyes or something, and he goes, "Yes, you can have whatever you want." You know what I mean? Like, imagine you could do that.
No, you have to. I think, you have to ask their permission, and they have to be willing. You can't just hypnotize them.
Who says there's no governing body that's going to stop me?
God, you and government
Imagine
today.
Imagine the policeman. The policeman pulls you over for speeding, and then you go with your eyes, and he goes, "Please move on. Everything is okay."
I reckon it's doable.
The
Let's give
old
it a go.
Viper eyes, where he goes.
Your eyes go into spirals like in the cartoons.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
That'd be amazing.
We've gone a little off.
Don't you have
topic.
like a little pendulum, like a little clock that moves like from side
like
to side?
that.
Just have them on standby.
Imagine George going up to order like a bourbon and Coke and going, "This drink will be for free." And the guy goes, "Okay,
No,
please enjoy
the
this
entire
drink
meal will
on the
be.
house." You know what I mean? Amazing.
Higher good. I think that's how we started out, for our higher good. Yeah.
Yep,
So
yep.
we've now
Free
gone to...
bourbon and Cokes is for everyone's higher good.
Oh my God. Oh,
Another
How can I
informed
fly
listener. We
like
started
an-
off so strong.
like
We've
an
ended so
eagle
silly.
when I work with turkeys. Is that
We
the
were
same?
for a moment in the education category, and now we're just all over the shop.
Oh, I know.
What category
Again.
are we in?
Oh,
None.
we're none.
I don't think we can put ourselves into
Do
one.
we have? Do you have to? Did we nominate a category?
No, we've got several categories, but that's the reason why we never do any well at any of the podcast awards, because we're spread so thin over, like we're educational, we're comical, we're parenting, we're like reality, we're not one particular
thing.
genre. We're
Well,
all
maybe
over
we
the
don't win
place.
any awards because we're shit. maybe it's up to us
Well,
to
maybe.
just do a bloody better
No.
job.
We'll keep on blaming it on the genre.
Yeah, we'll blame it.
We'll blame it on everything but ourselves.
Just try harder. Stop talking about your mesmerising shit and policemen and bourbons, and actually do a good fucking podcast. Maybe that's what we need to do.
It's all true.
It is all true. Oh my
Oh,
God.
we cover some ground, don't we?
Oh, we do.
We laugh.
Okay, well,
we laugh.
next week, join us for hypnotisms. Yeah. And
Hypnotherapy.
Hypnotherapy.
For your greater good
Yeah.
of improving your life in 10 easy steps.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to learn a little bit about that.
Okay.
Okay, we'll see if we can find someone.
Yep.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate your company.
Lots of love. Take care.
Yeah.
Feel free to nominate us for an award. For Christ's sake.
Or just vote.
We should just start our own awards. Give
Yes.
ourselves awards.
The It's All True Awards.
Yeah.
Oh my God. We need to actually do an episode on that where we actually present awards for the worst newsreader. Oh no, well, they might be someone that we know. Okay, well,
We'll call
Like
it the
best joke.
No.
the potties. We'll call it the potties. That's the awards or something, like the Logies. Yeah.
The casties.
We just need to create our own, who does all the ratings and stuff? CanStar?
Do you know what I've
We'll
just
create
realised?
our own CanStar
We've basically just had a production meeting in the last 15 minutes of this podcast. So our podcast has now become a production meeting talking about future episodes.
Probably stuff we shouldn't be saying while we're recording. I'm sorry we've just chewed up 15 minutes of your life. Get back to driving a truck or cooking food or...
We've just spitballed all these different topics and guests.
Yeah. Little peek behind the curtain.
I wonder why we haven't won
We
any
didn't even
awards.
know we do this.
I'm sorry our inner monologue came out.
Oh, classic.
We'll have
Oh
our
my
shit
God.
together for next week's episode, of which you now know the contents and don't need to listen.
I love it.
All right, catch you
All
next
right.
time.
Okay.
Hey, Ro.
Bye.
It's All True, the podcast with Grant and Chezzi Denya.
Bye bye. See you next time.